Hello, Professor. I'm doing my presentation right now. So, it is about police stop and frisk. So, police stop and frisk started in 1968. It was about Terry versus Ohio. So, with that, years ago, it all happened when police officers decided to stereotype three individuals, and with that, they ended up searching this individual named Terry, and they ended up frisking him, which then caused them to find a gun on two of the individuals. And with that, Terry felt as though he was being violated because there was no reasonable suspicion. But the officers just believed that something was going to happen. That reason why they decided to stop him and stop and frisk him and his friends. Some case facts. The Plainview officers believed that him and his friends were going to do a casing job. Also, once they found a gun on Terry, in about 1967, they sentenced him to 3 years due to them finding this on Terry. What is stop and frisk in inner cities? Many cities have the stop and frisk program, which helps stop high crime in certain areas. It is also stated that more African Americans are being stopped by police than other races. Studies also show that half the population are young male adults. And also, it is stated that police are more unbiased police officers, and they are more to have a higher rate of arresting African Americans than any other race. Probable cause: regional suspicion to stop and frisk a person. Probable cause for warrantless search or arrest. So police officers must have this. The Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment explains that a person's privacy is important. Also, that an officer must have a probable cause to arrest. Police officers can conduct a stop and frisk if a crime will occur or has been committed. They cannot stop and frisk someone just because they feel like it or just because of the person's race. They have to have a certain cause to why they want to arrest the person or why they want to stop and frisk the person. With that, this falls under the labeling theory, which it pretty much states that a person's being influenced by members in the society. Police officers are labeling certain individuals and ethnic groups which can influence the society. Solutions. The Fourth Amendment covers the privacy of a person. Police officers should be trained to not stereotype certain groups. Police officers should have a more diverse community, a more diverse police department, especially now in these certain times, especially with police in the community. It should have more of police officers having more engagements with the society so that way they don't fear the police. Also, I have a short video.
And we are back now with the roiling debate on big city crime. A federal judge ruled this week that the stop and frisk tactics of New York City's police are unconstitutional, drawing a stiff rebuke from Mayor Bloomberg, qualified support from the Democrats out to replace him. So is it smart crime fighting or racial profiling? Our roundtable set to weigh in on that. First, ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas sat down with New York Police Chief Ray Kelly.
For critics, it's images like this that fuel the resentment over the NYPD's policy of stop and frisk. To some blacks and Latinos, it's naked racial profiling, with them as the targets of an occupying force.
I remember them banging my head into this.
Is it fair, some minorities ask, that African Americans and Hispanics make up 52% of the city's population, but black and Latino males represent 84% of those stopped?
NYPD, keep your hands off me.
But to the police and mayor, stop and frisk, enforced by a racially diverse department, is a highly effective crime-fighting tool.
We have to give the members of our police department the tool they need to do their jobs without being micromanaged and second-guessed.
When we met with Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, he flatly rejected a federal judge's conclusion that his tactics violate the Constitution.
Now, the critics call it racial profiling. The judge called what you do, stop and frisk, unconstitutional. Why is it not racial profiling?
Well, you have to apply a formula of sorts. Do the stops comport with the description given by the victims of perpetrators of violent crime? And our stops certainly do. 97% of the shooting victims in New York City are black or Latino, as is the identified perpetrators of these crimes.
The issue for some of the people, the thousands who are stopped, is that if they've committed no crime, you find no weapon, that is creating a sense of resentment. As an African-American male, I know I've been pulled over a couple times, for reasons I couldn't understand. And afterward, I sort of felt a little violated, a little frustrated. Can you see where the people are coming from?
Absolutely.
And I agree with this man, how he states that individuals, especially African Americans or Latinos, feel as though there's frustration within the police department because they don't feel as though they could trust the police, and especially too, it's a big population of Latinos and blacks in certain neighborhoods, and they feel as though they're being targeted, and especially too if areas have high crime, police officers are more so going to look for a suspect or a certain way that a person may look. So that's an issue.
Why they're frustrated.
Absolutely. Understandable. Nobody wants to be stopped. We have engaged in a major training evolution for several years, focusing on these issues, to do these stops with courtesy, do them with respect.
Stop and frisk allows officers to detain people they deem suspicious in high crime areas. A federal judge said the practice targets minorities, calling it demeaning and humiliating. Her ruling calls for a monitor to oversee NYPD practices and a trial program for some officers to wear cameras to record arrests, as they do in an increasing number of cities. Again, Kelly is skeptical.
When do you turn the camera on? When do you turn it off? Do you have it on when somebody comes and wants to give you confidential information?
For all the critics, Kelly points to these blunt facts. There is far less crime and less blood in his streets. In New York City, there have been more than 7,300 fewer deaths in the 11 years since Bloomberg took office than in the previous decade. That's a 50% drop.
What we're doing and what we're trying to do is save lives. Murders are down to record lows, shootings down to record lows. Things are going right here in New York, and this decision.
So with stop and frisk in New York City or certain areas, they're pretty much stating that there's less crime because they're putting away the bad criminals.
Certainly has the potential of overturning.
So the solution is to stop crime and not really categorize certain people just because of how they look, but to just help stop crime around the community, around certain areas, but it just should be everywhere. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.